So welcome everybody. My name is Andrea Brockmeyer and I am the Director of Project Management at Watermark Learning, here to spend the next half hour with you talking about PMI certifications. And I have been teaching, developing curriculum, and working with PMI certifications for nearly 20 years. So hopefully I can answer any questions that you have and maybe answer some you didn't know you had about PMI certifications today. So it's terrific to be here with you. Just a quick note, we have our monthly certification chat, and next month we're looking at September 7th. And our upcoming courses, our PMI-ACP certification class, starting October 9th, and that's going to be a night class. So it's going to be Tuesday, Wednesday nights for a couple of weeks. Actually a few weeks. So it's going to be 3 hours a night for 6 weeks. And that will be starting October 9th. October 30th, we'll have our PBA course starting, and that's virtual online. And then we've got a PMP certification class starting September 10th, and that's live in person. Also, just note that our certification classes are offered as anytime learning options as well. So those are self-paced, those are recordings of previous classes that you can watch, and then you have access to me or another resource via email or phone or whatever to help answer questions that you may have. So that's a great option for if you just have scheduling challenges like lots of us do. So and also I've got, you will be getting a copy of these slides after today's presentation. And also we record this, and you will have access to the recording of this session today too. So you also will get, after our session today, you will get some free gifts for participating today. So we've got some discounts coming your way as well. So be on the lookout for those. So, and if anybody has any questions, does anybody have any questions at all? Usually I've got a few things that I like to talk about in the absence of questions, and trying to anticipate your questions. So my thinking today is that I would talk about, focus on really the three main certifications that people are interested in: the PMP, the ACP, and the PBA. But this is intended to be a chat, so if you have some questions, go ahead and shoot them in the question box there, and I will answer them, or just let you know that we'll be coming up to them. So coming up to the answers. So usually what I like to cover is sort of what the qualifications are to sit for these exams, and then really to focus on the key resources that you need to be using in order to prepare, because I think that's a big question. There's just so many different books and things out there. So what do you really need to focus on? So, and then some study tips. So that's kind of where I'm going. But again, you guys can drive the train here, and if you've got questions that you want to focus on, then just send them my way, and I'll be glad to answer those. Of course, after today's session, if you still have a question, you can feel free to contact me at andrea.brockmeyer@watermarklearning.com, and I will follow up with you as well. Yes, there is so the question is, for the PBA, is there a template to enter experience? Great question. Yes, actually we have some templates for all of the PMI certifications that you can use to help you capture your experience. So if you look at information on classes and study materials here, actually I've got a slide around this too. You can get to them through these links here. And this page is just some handy links that you might want to just make a note of, for different resources. So, but yes, there is, and I will talk a little bit more about those here in a minute. But yes, I've got those for the PBA, ACP, and the PMP. So, so where do you start? If you're thinking, I want to do this certification thing, what do I start with? And so a really good place to start is with just the basics around the particular certification that you're interested in. So the handbook and the examination content outline, or what's affectionately referred to as the ECO, are great places to start. So every PMI certification has a handbook. It's a great document. It explains exactly what the qualifications are to sit for the exam. It tells you about the test. It walks you step by step through what you have to do to schedule your test. It talks about cost. It talks about how it's gets scored. It talks about all sorts of things. So if you go to PMI.org and click on certifications, and then you select whichever certification you're interested in, on the right column, right on the right margin of the screen, you will find a link to the handbook. It's free. You just download it. Check it out. It's a great resource. The other thing that's really important is the ECO, the exam content outline. This is essentially the blueprint for the exam. This is what they use when they're writing questions. All of your questions have to map back to the domains and tasks as they're laid out there in the ECO. So that's a really key resource. It's an often overlooked resource, but you really should use that as you're studying to kind of help you kind of organize your thinking as the exam is actually outlined. And then the other thing you want to do, of course, is, identify what are the relevant PMI standards that I need to be paying attention to for purposes of my particular exam. So that's one of the things I wanted to talk about today. So in terms of the template for entering experience, here it is. These are links that you can use to enter your experience. These are free worksheets that you can download on the watermarklearning.com website. You have to sign up for a free membership on our site, but these are just Excel spreadsheets that enable you to enter your experience and to kind of start to get some thoughts around, what are the projects you're going to identify and how does your experience lay out. And so these can be really helpful. I will say, though, that when you are on the PMI website completing your application, the interface that they have is pretty easy as well. I still think it's helpful. Most people find it helpful to kind of capture your thoughts ahead of time in something like one of these worksheets. But don't be intimidated by the whole application process. Go ahead and get your free login at PMI.org. Take a look at the, start an application, take a look at it. It's really, the interfaces are pretty easy to use. So, but this is a good thing. These worksheets are good so you can kind of start thinking about, what are the projects I'm going to use, how many hours were they, and start to total your hours. So I think that's what you were talking. I think that was the question about a template for entering experience. Yeah. All right. So ACP, anybody out there interested in the ACP? Hands for anybody that's thinking about that at all? So this is one of PMI's fastest growing certifications. I think this is a great certification. The requirements are a little less rigorous than some of the other certifications like the PMP or the PBA. You need 1,500 hours, 8 months of experience totaling at least 1,500 hours of Agile project experience in any role within the last 3 years. So, and that Agile project experience, maybe you weren't on a Scrum team or something like that, but, if you take a look at the Agile practices, there's incremental development and iterative and those kinds of things. Just don't be intimidated by the by the process here. So, and then you also need 2,000 hours of general project experience in any role within the last 5 years. So any of your, you could have been a team member or whatever. You have to have some project experience as well. So those are the requirements there for the ACP. And just as a note about overlapping projects. So one of the things that people always get kind of concerned about is if you're working on multiple projects at the same time, or you're working on more than one project simultaneously, most of your hours will count, but it will not count as 2 months. So if I had 2 months here, project 1 and project 2 that I was working on in the month of March, that's only 1 month of experience, right? That's not going to be 2 months of experience. So that's all that they're saying there. And then for those that already have a PMP for the ACP, you already have your 2,000 project hours. So you just need the 1,500 of the Agile experience there. Importantly, with any of the certifications, don't worry about your title. These are not, when you're capturing and identifying and detailing your experience, it's not a title thing. Many people manage projects without the title project manager. Many people do business analysis without the title business analyst. So that's definitely not a criteria. Also, then you need contact hours. So for every PMI certification, you need experience and you need some education, right? Education called contact hours. People sometimes call these PDUs. You can't actually earn a PDU until you're already certified. So you need, prior to getting certified, you need contact hours in whatever field it is that you're getting certification in. You need 21 for the ACP. Training on any agile practices. There's no time limit on that. It could have been 15 years ago. And you have to have that done before sitting for the exam. So the key resources for studying for the ACP. Here's the handbook and the exam content outline. And then there's things like some of these Pulse of the Professions are really good. You can get these free on PMI's website as well. And I just think they're a really good way, if you're, particularly if you're new to PMI, to kind of, they're shorter, but just read them, not to memorize or anything. It's not like you're going to be tested on them, but they are a good way to kind of wrap your head around how they think and some of the verbiage, and they're just good documents to provide a little context sometimes. And then the key documents for the ACP, the PMBOK to some extent. If you're entirely unfamiliar with that, you might take a look at that. You don't think you have to know the whole thing inside and out. You don't, but take a look at that. But the one you really want to focus on is the Agile Practice Guide, one of my favorite PMI publications. It's not a heavy read, not real long. It's actually a great resource for exam prep and just everyday work. So that's going to be your key resource there, is that practice guide. And it looks great. Who doesn't like a book cover that looks like that, huh? All right, other things you can do is take our prep course, our boot camp, our ACP boot camp. This works really great as an anytime learning. So the ACP exam, a little easier, a little shorter exam, and that ATL gives you all 21 contact hours. So I think this really works well for as an anytime learning option. And then our online study exam. We've got a database of questions to help you prep, and those are really good. And between those two, you really should be pretty set for the ACP exam. So that's really time well spent, and it's just really a good option. All right, so that's the ACP. Then the PBA, the fastest growing certification from PMI. Anybody out there interested in the PBA? Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, I think this is an awesome certification. And I'm going to put hands down. How many of you are interested in the PBA, are already PMPs? Anybody? Yeah. So this is, to me, any PMP should think about pursuing this certification, because most project managers have done some business analysis, and you may not have called it that or recognized that that's what you're doing, but once you start getting into this, you'll recognize that a lot of what you do is business analysis. So this is a great certification. And so qualifications for this are more consistent with the PMP. This is a little more rigorous here. In the criteria, there are two categories: if you have a college degree or not, and they're just looking at undergraduate degrees. So if you have a college degree, you need at least 36 months of business analysis experience, totaling at least 4,500 hours. Or if you have a high school diploma or associates, or you do not have an undergraduate degree, you need 5 years or 60 months of experience, totaling at least 7,500 hours of business analysis experience. So that can go back as far as 8 years. So that gets to be a little more time consuming to think about that and capture that experience. And then in addition to that, you need 2,000 hours of experience working on projects. So the PBA, it's a Project Management Institute, is all about business analysis done in the context of projects and programs. So they're saying, you need to have some project experience too. And Now, if part of your 45 or 7,500 hours was in projects, if you have 2,000 hours of that was already in projects, then you're fine. You don't have to have additional experience, and that's probably almost always going to be the case, right? And so you need you need to have some of that experience be in project work. Again, if you already have a PMP, you don't have to worry about the 2,000 hours because you've already documented that. And then you need 35 contact hours for the PBA. That's training and business analysis practices. No time limit on that, and you have to have that done before you submit your application. All right, and then resources for the PBA. So this has changed. This changed effective June 25th of this year. So we're just about a little over a month into this. So you've got your handbook, you've got the ECO again, and then the couple of key documents. One, the Guide to Business Analysis. So this was published in November of 2017. If you're familiar with the PMBOK, this is going to look really similar. So the PMBOK is to project management, what the Guide to BA is to business analysis. Except that this is not as long, and the pages are not that awful gray, and it's just, but it's very similar. So it's got processes, it's got knowledge areas and process groups, you've got inputs, tools, and outputs. But for the purposes of the PBA, you do not need to spend time memorizing inputs, tools, and outputs. So the PBA exam is not going to go into in-depth knowledge of the Guide to Business Analysis like PMP people have to spend time with the PMBOK. But it is a key resource. You'll want to read it for sure. Definitely a document you need to have is the practitioner's guide, the business analysis for practitioners, a practice guide. And these complement each other. The practice guide is another one of my favorite PMI publications. It's super practical. It shows you how to use different tools and techniques. And you'll definitely want to use this as a key resource. So these are kind of the main documents that you want to use for purposes of PBA prep. And then there's also a requirements management practice guide. You don't need to spend a ton of time on this. I would take a look at this one though. One thing it has is a nice diagram that shows how project management and business analysis processes overlap and interact. So I kind of like that. I think it's on page 4 or something like that. But I'd take a look at it. Again, it's just a good way to kind of commune with the language and how they think. So these are the main sources here for PBA prep. Of course, as with any PMI publication, they're free downloads for PMI members, or you can buy them. You can bundle the practice guide and the Guide to BA and get a little discount too. All right, and then we have a boot camp as well for the PBA. And that starts in October, and of course that gives you all 35 contact hours that you need. And then we've got our study guide, which should be out, working on it right now, and we're looking forward to that getting published and being available. I should think by within the next month for sure. So that's coming out here in a little bit. And then our online study exam, that already has been updated, so you can start using that now. This has over 800 questions to help you for PBA prep. This was developed with resources that have a lot of experience with business analysis and that actually were involved in the development of PMI's BA standards. So this is a really great resource for the PBA prep. All right. I'm just going to keep going here. And then the PMP, similar kind of thing to the PBA. So your experience has to be in one of those 2 categories again within the last 8 years, and this has to be time spent leading and directing projects. How many folks out there are looking at the PMP, by the way? Anybody? We're seeing a lot of interest in it right now. And so that's great. That's really great. So, and then you need 35 contact hours as well. And of course, the key resources for the PMP, the PMBOK, and the handbook and the examination content and outline for that exam as well. So no big mystery there. So we've got our boot camp for the PMP coming up here, and that will include some online practice questions as well, and that's starting in September. So some just general things to note about certification, PMI certification. One of the things that you'll have to do when you submit your application is include with your experience a contact who can verify your experience. So think about who those might be ahead of time. Make sure they're people that you can get in touch with if you get audited, because they audit a certain number of, they randomly audit applications, which is a good thing. And so you may need to get in touch with them and all they have to do is verify that you did something. They just sign something and send it in. Don't worry about your title. So if one of the things that's holding you up is thinking, well, I mean, I've done these things, but I haven't had that title, or maybe I haven't done these things real formally, that's okay. One of the benefits of certification is that it helps you. It's on the one hand, it's validating of your experience, and on the other hand, it helps you learn as well. The process of getting certified really helps you understand your discipline and your practice, according to industry standards. And so there are things that maybe you haven't done formally, or maybe you're not, I mean, this is what I do. And then you recognize that the things you've been doing are good practice. And so, that's an okay thing. And again, it's not about whatever title you've had. Be prepared to be audited. So they audit, as I say, they randomly audit, every so many applications. Don't be, disturbed by that. That's just something they do for quality control. And when you're trying to think about how am I going to describe my experience, because I know I've done business analysis, but I wasn't called a BA, and they really didn't say that's what I was doing, but I know that's what I was doing. So use that exam content outline. So those ECOs, again, the blueprints for the exam have domains like, for example, initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing. Or for the PBA, needs assessment, planning, analysis, traceability and monitoring, and evaluation. And then there are tasks within each one of those domains. Use those descriptions of those tasks to help you describe your experience, so that you can kind of think about what you were doing consistently with how those tasks are described. And that will help you. For one thing, it'll help you think, about what you've done in a way that's consistent with the standards. Also, it'll make your application more logical when they're when they're reviewing that, if you're describing it to be consistent with those tasks. So the worksheets that we have that you can download have descriptions of the tasks right there in the worksheet. So you can hover over the domain titles and it'll show you what the tasks are. So you can use that to kind of help you think about what those are all about. All right, so I'd love to track these numbers, and just learned the other day, there's a whole bunch of people out there that like to do this. So I like to keep track of how many people have these certifications. I just gathered these here this morning. So you can see, there's pretty steady growth year in and year out here with these. And the two that continue to stay in the front here in terms of the growth rate are the ACP and the PBA. So we're almost getting up to 3,000 PBAs here, definitely the fastest growing. And the ACP numbers continue to grow as well. So that's pretty cool. I think that's a good thing. And I think it's really good for projects that I think a lot of PMs come to the PBA from a project management perspective. And I think that's great for projects. I think it's great for organizations. I will tell you that I'm a better project manager with having gone through the PBA to recognize the things that I'm doing that are project management and the things that I'm doing that are business analysis. It just makes you overall a better professional. So for what that's worth, if you like to crunch numbers, those are kind of fun. All right, then a pop quiz question here. What is more fun than studying for a PMI exam? Anybody? Anybody? Everything's more fun than studying for a PMI exam. So my advice is when you decide to do this, to make sure you do a little something every day, 7 days a week, every 24-hour period, one thing for each little box on the calendar. So, these things take time, and everybody's got, so many other things going on day in and day out. And it's very easy to let these things fall by the wayside. And so I have always found that once you decide to do it, just make sure that you get it on your brain every day, even if it's just 5 minutes with flashcards, something so that you don't let a day go by and then 2 days and then 3 days and then you just kind of lose sight of it. So that's my number one piece of advice. So overall, my top 10 tips for certification prep: do a little something every day, as I say. Um, Plan to spend a good number of hours. Now, this says at least 40 hours at a minimum, and that's a real minimum. I would say probably, at least 50, if not more. Some people will say, oh, 100 hours or something like that. There is a point of diminishing return here. You are looking to pass this. You're not going to get an A, B, C. It's like you're going to get a grade. You're going to get a pass or no pass. You're looking to do well enough, right? We're looking to pass. So, take it until you feel pretty comfortable. You're doing well on practice tests, but you don't need to put hundreds and hundreds of hours in. But it is a lot, and that's 40 hours after a class if you take one. My advice is always to read the standards. So whether it's a PMBOK or the practice guide or the guide to BA, some people say, oh, I didn't even read those things. Well, I would not personally advise that. I always advise people to read the standards. Use our study resources from class, or do the Anytime Learning, the self-study. Study one chapter, domain, or knowledge area at a time. So instead of kind of reading something cover to cover or reading sort of horizontally, kind of let's focus on planning, or let's focus on traceability, and just do a deep dive on that. Read that section from all of the sources, and then do drills in that particular area, kind of do a vertical deep dive. Use flashcards or create flashcards. So one of my favorite cert prep techniques is to get a bunch of note cards go to somewhere and get little inexpensive note cards. And as you're studying and reading, create flashcards. Write a term on one side, write the definition on the back, and test yourself as you're waiting for the bus, or sitting in a meeting or something, in a meeting that you don't need to be participating in, I guess. Or draw a little diagram, and on the back a couple of key points about it. Those can be super helpful. So the act of actually writing it makes your brain do something different than just listening or reading it. Practice doing simulations or mixes of questions from all of the different areas. We recommend studying and prepping until you're getting well into the 80% on practice tests. And then practice your brain dump. So a brain dump is where you kind of purge maybe equations or key terms or things that you want to remember in your test. You take time at the beginning of the test, maybe 5-10 minutes, to just do a little brain dump onto your scratch paper or your whiteboard, and practice doing that so that when you get into the test, you know how long it's going to take you and you can do it very quickly. And then number one is to know thyself, meaning whatever technique works for you. Here are suggestions. Other people have suggestions. But respect your own test taking and certification prep style. Don't let somebody tell you. I had people tell me, oh, if you know this material on the PMP, for example, you should be out of there in 90 minutes. Well, I'm a cautious test taker. I take a long time. I took pretty much all 4 hours, and that's okay. So do what works for you. Make yourself comfortable. Be open to ideas, but you got to do what works for you. So that's what I've got, and that gets us to about 12:30. So any other questions? I hope that was helpful. Is there anything that I didn't answer? Anybody about PMI certification at all? Anybody? Okay, well, we'll call it good then. So thank you very much. As I say, I hope this was helpful. I hope this answered some of your questions. If you have others here after we hang up, don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to help you and partner with you and your certification journey, wherever that takes you. And I will tell you that I, in the many, many years I've been doing this, never had somebody come and say that certification wasn't time well spent. So I think if this is something you're thinking about doing, I think you'll find it rewarding and helpful, and it'll be good for you in whatever it is you're trying to do. So good luck to all of you. I wish you all the very best, and have a great rest of your day.